Hey everybody, welcome back into another FF Statistics YouTube video. This is the second one so far. Last week's was on Christian McCaffrey, so you can go back on the YouTube channel and find that if you missed it. Today's is kind of going to be similar. It's actually another running back, and I believe it's another polarizing running back that a lot of people actually aren't really sure on what to make of him, especially for the 2018 season, given his past history and performance. And that running back is actually Jerick McKinnon. Taking a look at Jerick McKinnon's stats over the past 4 years, it really isn't, all too enticing, especially for a player who is potentially a top 12 ADP type of running back this year because of his new situation in San Francisco now. But taking a look at his last 4 years in Minnesota, you'll see that he really wasn't all too much of a rusher. A career high of 159 carries, a career high of 570 rushing yards, and only 3 rushing touchdowns. Not very efficient. Last 2 years hasn't even eclipsed 3.8 yards per carry. Where he does do most of his damage, and also similar to Christian McCaffrey, in the receiving game. As you can see, especially last year, he had 68 targets, 51 receptions, 421 receiving yards, and 2 touchdowns. All of those are career highs across the board, and that was mostly due to the absence of Dalvin Cook. But even the season before, he saw 53 targets, 43 receptions, 255 yards, and 2 touchdowns as well. So he really took a step forward in his third year, and then really took another step forward last year when he finished as the PPR RB17 with 176.1 fantasy points. And that was a pretty decent jump from RB28 in 2016 when he had 146 fantasy points. And that was the first time in his career he finished as a top 30 running back. And like I said, doing most of his damage out of the backfield as a receiving back instead of a running back. Taking a look at Jerick McKinnon's Z-score analysis for his career since he entered the league as a 22-year-old, you will notice that his first 2 seasons were below average, since the yellow line is below the red line in this graph, hovering around that Z-score of about a 0. So it isn't that great, but it's all right, I guess, for a player who might eventually go on to become a top 24 running back. You will actually see in his third year as a 24-year-old, he was basically right on that line, so he was average. For a player who would eventually go on to become a top 24 running back. And then you see last year he took another step forward, broke the 1 Z-score mark, and then we don't know how he would do in ages 26, 27, everything like that. But it is a very interesting Z-score to look at Jerick McKinnon now that we have a full 4-year sample size for him. And it's actually really interesting to see how he would compare to other players that we might know of today. And the one player that comes up and really stands out when you look at Z-score analysis is actually Mark Ingram. Looking at Mark Ingram's Z-score analysis, you'll see that his first 3 seasons are kind of similar to Jerick McKinnon's. His first 2 seasons, he hovers around that 0 Z-score. And then in his third year, he actually took a dip, whereas Jerick McKinnon increased to the average as a 24-year-old. And then you'll see at the 25, they have basically identical Z-scores as a 25-year-old. And since we know how Mark Ingram has done since he's turned 26, you'll know that he has basically been a high RB2 or even a low-end RB1, including last year when he really broke out as a 28-year-old. So looking at this, can we really expect Jerick McKinnon to become that top 12 running back so late in his career? Based on Mark Ingram's track record, definitely, you can definitely say that it is okay to expect Jerick McKinnon to do everything that a lot of people project him to be able to do and finish as a top 12 running back in Kyle Shanahan's San Francisco offense, despite the lack of production in his first 3 years. And so now we can look at my 2018 projections for Jerick McKinnon in San Francisco. This is based on numerous factors, mostly on how Kyle Shanahan likes to run his offense and how he likes to utilize his running backs, wide receivers, tight ends, all of that stuff like that. So based on all of that, I have Jerick McKinnon statted out for 190 rushing attempts for 755 yards. That is actually less than 4 yards per carry, and also 4 to 5 touchdowns as well on the ground. In the receiving game, I have him at 82 targets for 60 receptions, 444 yards, and 2 to 3 touchdowns as well in through the air. So you notice that we're looking at potentially a 1,200-yard running back with about 5 to 8 touchdowns, maybe, depending on how many you want to give him there. So based on all of that and based on my projections and statting him out, we're looking at 224.5 PPR fantasy points, which would have made him the RB11 in PPR formats. Based on that statting out as well, he would have been the RB10 in half point and the RB14 in standard leagues, mainly due to the fact that he has a low touchdown output for the season. One thing I would like to point out about this is that since this is based on how Kyle Shanahan likes to run his offense, a lot of this, especially the targets and the target share that Jerick McKinnon receives, when I statted out the entire offense, he actually receives 14% of Jimmy Garoppolo's target share of 587 pass attempts. And that number actually is 50 less attempts than how many the three quarterbacks from the San Francisco 49ers threw for last year in 613 passing attempts. So I'm actually projecting a lower amount of targets throughout the entire San Francisco offense because of the lower amount of pass attempts by Jimmy Garoppolo. However, that is more pass attempts than what Matt Ryan threw for in 2016, but it is, again, less than however many he threw in 2015 when he threw for 614 passes. Assuming that Jimmy Garoppolo throws for 587 pass attempts, this is what I think Jerick McKinnon would be statted out for with a 14% target share. Now that number could increase. We're looking at a 15 or 16% target share, giving him more targets, obviously, and more receptions. Or Jimmy Garoppolo could throw for over 600 passes, at which point then we're looking at potentially a 100 target running back, upwards of the Christian McCaffrey and Le'Veon Bell, David Johnson type utilization in the passing game, which would be absolutely insane. And since Jerick McKinnon is known for his passing down chops, we're looking at potentially a top 8 running back in PPR. I think that's his absolute ceiling right there because he isn't really all too great on the ground. Also kind of similar to Christian McCaffrey, but his main value in fantasy will be based on the receiving game and how he is utilized in Kyle Shanahan's offense, which has been very favorable to pass-catching running backs. Based on all of that, I think that's really how Jerick McKinnon is going to be. I think he's somewhat of a safe running back, especially where he's being drafted. A lot of people might overdraft him, thinking that he could be that potential top 6, 7 running back, kind of like how Lamar Miller was when he went to the Texans after being in Miami. So I don't want to overhype him to the Lamar Miller level that he was, but I think it's safe to say that Jerick McKinnon is looking at a back-end RB1, if not, maybe a top 15 running back as a floor, mainly due to that receiving down volume that he'll receive under Kyle Shanahan. That's how I view Jerick McKinnon, and I hope that you guys, kind of can view him the same way. And I hope that this actually helps some of you guys sort out how you think you should value Jerick McKinnon and how your league will also value him if some of them are really on his hype train. Maybe they're overhyping him, and that's a player that you're not really going to be all too interested in come redraft season, or you don't really want to trade for in Dynasty, depending on if your guys' rookie drafts are still going on or whatnot. Again, the website is ffstatistics.com. Go check it out. Use all of it. Use the Z-score analysis like I used in this video today. Thank you guys so much for listening, and make sure to check out that Christian McCaffrey YouTube video from last week in the channel as well. All right, thanks guys. Later.